So here we have a terrain that's been created from a rule. The rule in this instance is a graphical filter. It could be an external file. Obviously we can make some changes to the terrain here. We can go down to slithers, gives us a slightly better representation of a terrain surface that we might want. If we get rid of the triangles, we'll see the graphics that we're looking at. So we can see we've got sprawling areas that we don't necessarily want included here. So let's put the triangles back on so we can clearly see what's happening. I could reduce the triangle edges down, and that's another way of controlling, but it still might give me areas that I would actually want to exclude from the triangulation. So what we might want to try and do is edit the terrain model. But what we'll find here is, because the rule overrides anything, we can't edit this. So what we actually need to do is look at that rule. So I'm just going to do it in the element information here. So we select the terrain, we see we have the rule there. What we get access to, a lock, deactivate rule, or remove the rule. So remove the rule will just take it down to a simple terrain model. However, what we could do just to try and tidy this particular job up is deactivate the rule. So what we can now do with the deactivate rule in place is actually do some triangle trimming. So I could do just do some thinning out in this area, just do a little bit there. Perhaps we've got an area in here that we want to thin out. You get the general idea. Okay, so we've done some trimming, some tidying up. We spend our time editing this. We're happy with the resulting boundary. We only perhaps want to add inside the boundary. So what's going to happen now is I need to reactivate that rule. Now the rule, as I reactivate it, is obviously going to take precedence here. So as I activate that rule, it hasn't reinstated the edges, it's preserved those edges, and it will preserve those edges that I edited until the terrain needs to reprocess. So if I was to add an element into a terrain and add a feature, it's going to be that. And I'm just going to add this in as a void. What we'll see are those areas that I trimmed out here being lost and reprocessed. So the trimming that I put in place has now been undone. I don't want that. I need to be able to preserve that trimming that I've done and the editing that I've done, the time that I've spent doing that. So what we've done is we've provided you the ability to create a terrain model boundary. So at this point in time, I can extract a graphic from the terrain model as I've generated, and then I can publish that back into the terrain as a boundary condition element. So even though the rule is in place for the graphical filters, I actually have a graphic now for the boundary. So here I'm just going to add as a boundary terrain model element, which is that, add boundary, where we now have a boundary element in place. So what will happen now if I come back and do the same process, this, add this in, and add it in as a void again. I've added in as a void, but all of my edits have been preserved. Okay, so this is an exterior boundary. Now, what would happen if I wanted to add a shape that was outside of this boundary? Well, that's where I'd need to be able to control the boundary that's generated and remove it and add another one. So this is why we add a couple of options. If I add it as an extract a graphic, I can take this boundary, extract the graphic, and now I've got a graphic which, if I come in, I can actually start to play with and adjust. So I can obviously delete points, I can pull this around, and delete a series of points, and create myself a new boundary condition if I wanted to, just like you could now. But obviously, that's a tidier way of doing this. If it was on the outside though, it may be that I actually need to remove this boundary. We'll see that the edge method here, edge by boundary, is now locked in as the trimming method that we're utilizing. So it may be that I need to remove that and free this up. And certainly that's the case if you are coming from an external file that has a pre-cooked surface and a pre-cooked boundary condition that you need to remove and extract. Okay, the boundary, convert to break line, no. Now it's reverted back to its previous state with no boundary condition, and it's reverted back to the max triangle length of 300. And again, obviously it's reinstated the rules, so those trimming edges are lost, but this is why we have the ability to create the graphics as well. So you can mix and match between the different modes within the terrain.